Welcome to Late Night Joe, Late Night Coffee. I haven't decided on the exact name, but this is going to be the first episode of my new podcast. My name is Zytroft. I am the editor-in-chief of the Bithion. It is my blog. I'm the main contributor to it, but I have another writer who writes for it. He goes by the name Jay Wild. I'm here, and I'm drinking some coffee late at night, hence the name. I've got my white mug here. It's almost empty because I've been sipping on it prior. It's a Green Mountain blend. It's the Dark Magic, one of my favorites since high school. I've brewed it with the Keurig. Actually, no, from college. I didn't drink coffee in high school. I was a loser then. So, I don't know how long this podcast is going to go. The battery life of my phone and the amount of memory storage left on my phone is, always up in the air. Although I can directly check the percentage of the battery of my phone. My phone could say it has 2 gigabytes worth of memory free, or it could say it has 750 megabytes, which I think it was close to, but I'm not too up on the stats right now, and also I'm not really sure how much memory just a purely audio recording takes up. I know it doesn't take up too much, but it does take up memory. That is a certainty. But yeah, usually I don't like talking to nobody, which this podcast is, although I'm talking to you, all my audience. But still, it's very impersonal, which I'm more of a conversational type. I've tried making podcasts in the past. They didn't go over well. Perhaps I was in the wrong mood, or I just don't like talking to the camera, especially. I don't like talking to nothing. But I was in the right mood tonight. I was feeling it, and here I am. Welcome any listeners. Thank you for tuning in. I'm sitting out here on a January night. It was a warmer day today, so it's not that cold tonight. My coffee don't be fooled, my coffee is not keeping me warm. I brewed it a few hours ago. I had forgotten about it. Got it back. Enjoying it now. Let's see. So, this podcasts are an interesting thing. I mean, to me, they, even though I didn't listen to too much radio, I did listen to some talk radio in the past, mainly, in the car, back high school days. But now with podcasts taking off, I mean, everyone's listening to them now, and they are replacing, broadcast radio. But it's a good thing, I think, because they're more accessible. You can listen to them at any time. Anyone can make them. They're all internet-based. And things are just getting much better for the entrepreneur, honestly. At a time when entrepreneurship is very neglected in schools and in the mainstream ideas that are promoted, at least up until lately, the internet and all this stuff is wonderful for the entrepreneur. There's so many opportunities out there now. And many of them, like podcasts, are not, they do not directly, instantaneously make you money. And if you're going into them with that explicit intent, then you're likely to not make much money on them. But if you go into making one of these with the intention of having fun and creating good content for your consumers, for your audience, for your community of people who consume your content, that's the goal. Your goal is to create the best quality content. And, when you create good quality content and you do it for a well enough period of time, eventually, sometimes, if you're lucky, you can make money off of that, whether that be through ads or you write a book, you sell a book. There's some great examples of recent people that have gained prominence coming up that same way. Who knows? But podcasts are great. I listen to them all the time. Because they are purely audio, I need something to look at, and I need something to potentially do with my hands, something to occupy me, because I'm very, gotta do something all the time. So what I do is one of my main things while I listen to podcasts is I play video games. I play Minecraft. That's one of the things. I play it on my PlayStation 3. It's a very mindless game. If I had nothing to listen to, or if I had nothing to listen to while doing it, I used to be able to play while listening to music, but even that got boring. So now I listen to podcasts, and that takes up my entire, all my attention that is not focused on the game. So it's a very relaxing thing to do. And recently I've began to get back into painting and doing artwork, and that's what I do while I listen to my podcasts. Not my podcast, this is my first one. Other people that my favorite podcasts. But yeah, so my idea of sitting outside comes from I've been listening to the Report of the Week's podcast. He does the food reviews on YouTube, but he also has a podcast that he releases every week or two. So he sits outside, I think. And then the name for this podcast comes from just pure, I had coffee. I was drinking coffee right now. But it also comes from the Dilbert author Scott Adams. He, I don't know if he still does them, but he did a series of Periscopes called Coffee with Scott Adams. And he would always brew his coffee and start talking about whatever. A lot of it with the election and everything, but everything with that now come to a close, and Donald Trump in office and starting to put in his work. Scott Adams is, he's focused back on other things. His persuasion, he's a big on persuasion. But I've been reading his book too. Haven't finished it yet. It takes me a little while to read books just because I read them in little snippets at a time, and I read them at my job too, on my lunch breaks. I work at a bookstore, so when I go on my lunch breaks, I can read stuff, but 15 minutes, half hour blips, you can't read that much. And when I'm home, I have so many other things to do. It's hard to read. I like reading, and there's so many things I want to read. My backlog of books to read is ridiculous. I mean, I will never, ever read them all. I've resigned myself to that. I don't hate myself anymore for not reading. But, I read what I can, and it's a great thing to do. So yeah, I mean, everyone should read something. I mean, reading is an important thing. You can teach yourself anything through books. Why do you think people always talk about why reading is so good? That's why I just said that, because I've always been told it my whole life. Here we go. Podcasts, talking to the camera. There's no camera. Talking to my phone, sitting outside, staring into the darkness. It's not too cold out. Not too bad. I'm enjoying it. I like to sit out here. Got my sweater on, my nice warm sweater I bought right before Christmas. I got my aunt the same one, so we can be sweater buddies sometimes. Got some nice sweatpants on, flannel shirt, my American flag socks that also have George Washington crossing the Delaware on them. Those were my favorite pair. I love American history. I have a degree in history, so when I saw those socks where did I see those socks? I saw them at, I believe it was PacSun. And PacSun is one of those stores that always has lots of colorful and bizarre patterns of socks, but they also tend to throw random things on them, like George Washington crossing the Delaware River, which is an important moment, I'd say, because that's when it was during the Trenton campaign, he crossed the Delaware to attack Trenton, the British at Trenton. It was one of his first main victories. Before that, during the war, he was not the greatest general in the world. He was pretty bad general. Not bad, but he lost a lot. I mean, he lost most of his battles up until that point. That was the turning point for him as a general. He crossed the Delaware, as seen in the iconic painting, which is, I'm sure, didn't look how it does in the painting. Wasn't standing up all gallantly, although there's no reason to not think of him that way. He was the founder of our nation, first president. Without his efforts, we would have remained probably a British colony for a good period of time, ended up another Canada. Who knows? I mean, that's alternative history that we'll never know what would have happened. I mean, there's an infinite amount of different outcomes that could have been. And so you could take any moment in history and say, what if? And you could have an infinite amount of outcomes for each one of those infinite amount of times. So I used to be real into alternate history, but because it's basically fiction. I mean, it's fiction. It's historical fiction that's not even, I mean, it's purely fiction, really. So I enjoy fiction, and I write fiction, but alternative history just kind of is too much of a tease in a way, especially at moments of history where I would have hoped things I wish things had happened differently. But alas, they didn't. So we're at our place now, but everything the way it is now, I can't really complain. Things are pretty good. And, there's always things to improve on and get better with. But the history of the world thus far could have been worse. And a lot of great stuff has happened already. A lot of great stuff has happened. A lot of great people, a lot of bad people, a lot of bad stuff, but most of those people have been deposed, and still more to depose. A lot of evil still in the world, but it's a constant fight, and it'll never end. So you got to be hopeful, live your life, don't live in fear, do what you can for what's good and right and truth. But other than that, the world is I'd say a good place. But enough of that. I'm going to have another sip of coffee. What time are we at here? We're at 12 minutes, almost 13 minutes. Wow, I didn't think I would make it this long. Consider this my first semi-successful podcast, depending on how far it goes. I'd say it's successful already. I guess depending on the audio outcome, and if I like when I listen to it again, I probably won't be able to make it through, but from what I'm saying now, I haven't run into anything that I'm like, nothing that I cringe at, nothing I think is terrible. Everything is publishable. I think there's a plane flying overhead off in the distance. But yeah, this should be good. I don't like listening to the playback of my voice, but that's something you learn to accept, and that's what I'm working on. And also, this is my very first podcast, so I am certain that if I keep this up, they will improve, because the more you do something, the better you get at it. Even if you completely suck at it, and you do it a lot, you're going to suck a little less after doing it a lot. That's just how systems versus goals work, and that's one of Scott Adams's things there. But yeah, so you do things a lot, and you try to improve, and you will get better. I mean, no, I couldn't even. I was going to say calculus. That's something that, I'd have to do 7 different foundational things first. I'm a arithmetic kind of guy. Accounting, numbers, real stuff, money, that's my field of mathematics. All that theoretical numbers and letters and equations have their place, and they're very important for society, but, leave that to my friend John, who was a math major. Johnny Cakes, he's I don't know how he does some of the stuff he does with math. Ugh. Especially the papers he wrote in those the final senior classes, the thesis, and you take a really specific topic like subtraction and you write 25 pages on that. I mean, I'm sure it can be done, but I mean, it's a bit, incomprehensible to me. It sounds a bit maddening. But yeah, it makes the world go round. Everything is math. This tree that I'm looking at is math. The Fibonacci sequence, I don't know if that's in the tree, but if it is, that's math. The angles and frequencies not frequencies, all the angles and everything that the light from the torch at the end of the driveway, the glare, I mean, if I take my glasses off, there's still glare, but the angle of light from the beams, those are mathematical numbers of sorts. Blibbity blobbity blibbity. For the longest time, I thought I was I assumed that I was left brain dominant, I suppose, because I, always prided myself in being logical and rational, and I still am, I guess, but that's all comes down to everyone. Everyone thinks they're rational and logical. Enough with the relativism, but I think I'm more of a... No, wait. No, sorry. Right brain is the logical, rational, and the left brain is the emotional, creative, and I'm very creative. I've been an artist and writer my whole life, and it only makes sense that I'm more left brain dominant, but I guess it was that I don't want to be grouped in with those irrational crazies that act purely on emotional impulse. So I always just put myself in the camp of right-brainers, but nothing is purely black and white, and no one is 100% rational or 100% irrational. So in current events in my life, I've come to the realization that I'm definitely more left brain than I thought I was, because went through a little bit of a tough time with an unnamed incident that's still a little bit ongoing, but I had a big burst of creativity during the time, partially inspired, but more so a way to occupy my time, so I don't think about the event, which is not just it's not a singular event, it's a developing situation, but still, I've had a burst of creativity. That's why I'm not out here recording this podcast, because of that. But you got to carry on in life. You have to keep doing what you got to do to be successful and be happy. And so focusing on creative ventures is a great way to take your mind off of stupid stuff. And that's essentially what it comes down to. I mean, the dumb little thing I was going through is just a stupid thing. It's an important thing, but the reaction that I had to it was a stupid way of reacting to it. And gotta take things less seriously sometimes. But enough about that, because you don't even know what the situation is. And it's very minuscule in comparison to real problems real people have. So, yeah, enough of that. It's getting a little chilly. There's a nice wind, a nice gust of breeze coming through, throwing that 48-degree air against my face and my legs, my feet, and my hands, making it, the wind chill, bringing it down in temperature. Good stuff, good coffee, even though it's ice cold, but I don't care. When you're a true coffee drinker, when you're when you are a true coffee drinker, you will drink it at any temperature, as long as, if it's regular brewed coffee, as long as you get the coffee while it is hot, and you can sip it or feel its heat once. If it cools off completely, if you put it in the fridge, it don't matter. It's still good. I still drink it. I mean, my job is, my day job is coffee, barista. So I'm well exposed to coffee. It's kind of fuels my life. And this all goes back to the title. It's a very appropriate title for the podcast, episode 1. Late Night Coffee. Is that what it is? Late Night Coffee, yeah, with Zytroft of the thebithion.blogspot.com. That's thebithion.blogspot.com. You can also find my YouTube videos on YouTube, youtube.com/Zytroft, Zytroft. I assume anyone who's listening to this podcast is already familiar with the name Zytroft, because you would have had to either stumble upon that YouTube channel that I just described the address to, or you're familiar with my blog, The Bithion, which actually, The Bithion, I like the name. I like the origin of the name. The Bithion is the Laminin word for festival, and the Bithion is a festival of ideas. But the Bithion, as I've been promoting it, I went to an event recently, and as I was promoting and talking about things, I've heard this a few times from many people, various people, various places, various sources, that the Bithion, the name is a little bit hard to remember, especially if it's the first time, and spelling it is not very difficult, but people have trouble with it, whatever. So I've been contemplating a name change. Nothing drastic, but maybe I'm gonna, slowly evolve the name to something different, something easier, something that stands out more, something more just like boom, something that will catch your eye. I don't know, but perhaps like a contraction of two words that people definitely know, like, the Canadian, the rebel media. You know what the word rebel is. You know what the word media is. If you hear rebel media, you know how to spell that. I mean, if you hear, anything. I mean, if you hear, there's so many different examples. Sometimes it's hard to pick one. But anyway, yeah. I mean, dangerandplay.com. Those are normal words that you can hear once, and you can remember. You can write them down. You can type it in. You can visit the website. I mean, that's not the key to Mike's success. Mike Cernovich is an expert at marketing, but still, though, it's good to have a name that's memorable. And don't get me wrong, this is not hating on the Bithion's name. I did start it years ago before this was ever going to be a legit blog, but I still like it. It's so good. It's so cool, in my opinion. Which really, when it comes to naming a blog, if you don't like the name of your own blog, then why are you writing for that blog? Change it. And I like it, so I'm going to keep it for a bit. But until I decide what I'd like to change it to, it's going to stay the Bithion. And there's no hate of that at all. It's getting a little chilly. What time? We're at 24 minutes. 24 and a half minutes. 24 minutes and 30 seconds. Perhaps in the future, I will have some guests on if I do continue these podcasts, if I do a second or third. It's very likely that you'll have a podcast to listen to where it is me hosting it, and I will be interviewing the Bithion's main secondary contributor, Jay Ralta, Jay Wild, whatever he's going by now. He's a pretty successful fan fiction on fanfiction.net. It's a crossover between Everybody Loves Raymond and the recent Disney Pixar film, Zootopia. Um, Jay is a big fan of both of those, and he decided to write a crossover. And his crossover has gained some good acclaim in the fan fiction community. You can find that on fanfiction.net. If you search, go to the crossovers button, you click that, and then you start with either Zootopia or Everybody Loves Raymond. You click on that, and then it goes to what that's being crossover with. You click the other one, and then you'll find the list is rather short of the crossover between those two. It's not the most commonly thought of pairing of shows or movies, but he does a very good job at crossing them over. I mean, going from a real-life human sitcom and transitioning that into a anthropomorphic animal animated world, you got to have a little bit of writing skill to do that. You got to be able to write some good stuff to make that work. I mean, anyone could write that, and it could be god awful. But Jay has some good skills there, and he was able to cross them over very nicely. So I actually helped edit a few of those too. But furthermore what? I don't know what I was going to go to from there. But yeah, you should check out those podcasts if that sounds interesting to you. You won't be disappointed. There's about 4 chapters. He's written about 4 chapters. 4 chapters in. It's a good read, I think. So I'm working on a novel. It's I've got about, I think, 11 chapters written. I write short chapters just because, I feel like I'm writing the book faster if I write shorter chapters, but it's hard I like to jump around. Multiple storylines. I do multiple, threads in the story, and then I like to braid them by having short chapters. And this book is still in the earlier phases. It's only about maybe 20% written, but I'm really liking where it's going, and I've got the whole of the story planned out. I can give you a little preview. It centers around a young man who has a rather odd name, and he goes through an experience, an otherworldly, you could say, experience to get his name changed. And that leads to other issues and problems within his life, combined with other external affairs in his city that are going on at the moment. And they all combine together to make a rather intriguing and original story. And when it is published, I will certainly, let y'all know, because I want to sell some books. I don't write a book just to make money, but I write a book because it's fun, but I also am writing it to make money, The fact that you can make money from writing books is one of the good incentives to writing a book, because otherwise people probably wouldn't write them. People would, but it would be a rather long waste of time. It's a lot of work writing a book. It's I don't know how some of these authors do it, but then again, there's ghost writers and copy writers and whatever those are, industry terms, like what's his name? The guy who writes 1,000 books a year. That's an exaggeration, but he writes a lot of books. James Patterson, he writes a ridiculous amount of books, and I don't know how you can do it. I mean, I'm sure he's gotten it down to a system. He knows how to write a book, and he can come up with a story. It's not easy. It's not hard to come up with a storyline for a book if you have that kind of thought, if you have that mindset. If you're an idea machine, a James Altucher idea, one of his things. But if you can pump out storylines and you can make good overviews, if you can just bang out some books, if you can just sit down and write, You got to be a writing machine, but you can do it. I'm not a big fan of James Patterson though. They're overly commercialized, I'd say, and they're just not my kind of thing. Thrillers, they're not memorable enough. I mean, it's this like recycled characters. I don't know. I've never read one of his books, but nothing about them ever really appealed to me. Um, oh no, Zytroft. He hates James Patterson, but has never read his book. That's not what I'm saying. There's so many, there's so many authors out there. You can't read them all, and even though you can have, an opinion on an author without reading them, I mean, everyone can have an opinion on anything. So, but I just never was interested enough. I mean, I read mainly nonfiction anyway, so the likelihood of me reading one of his books in particular is unlikely. So, but still, I can have an opinion, and I give him a lot of credit. He's a very successful author, and he's written numerous books, way more than I'll ever write in 10 lifetimes. So, good job to him. He's made a great living on writing books, and I give him that. I just not interested in reading anything he's written. So, podcast. If it wasn't for this breeze, it'd be a very pleasant night to sit out here, especially in the colder seasons, which I am. Northern blood. Every summer, I wish I was in Ireland, because it's 50 to 60 degrees there all the time, and it's rainy, and it's perfect for sitting inside and writing and doing whatnot that doesn't involve being outside sweating, or inside sweating for that matter. Because, money, if money's no problem, then you can crank up the air conditioning all you want, but when money is an object, then you have to watch the bills and not crank it up too high. Otherwise, you got to crank down that other electricity. TVs, straight chargers just stuck in the wall. Those blow dryers use a lot of electricity, apparently. I mean, if you want to have a nice, cool house in the summertime, you can make it work. You can save money lots of places. It's not hard to save money, but you just got to have that discipline. So, well, I just finished my coffee. I'm getting a little shivery, and I think this was a very successful first podcast, considering how my other ones have gone. Well, being that none of them were ever published, that can give you an idea of how they went. Most of them never made it past a minute or two, because it was just like, I tried recording one in the morning, and the morning is not the time for me to do much. I can't do much in the morning, especially if it involves, having calm and collected thoughts to be able to speak about whatever's on my mind and talk to a phone or a camera with no one behind it or no one on the other line. It's not my favorite thing to do. So right now, I'd say this was rather successful. And if I decide that I liked what I've done here, and if I get a good, response from those who listen, I may continue doing these, and I'm certain that as they go on, I'll have guests, and the quality will get better. My ability to speak. This is essentially public speaking in a way. You just have no audience. But if you are, every artist is his own worst critic, and if you are your most critical audience member, then speaking by yourself to a phone or whatever, it's going to be just the same as public speaking. So I will improve at this. It's off the cuff. Nothing was planned out. So I will improve. I'll get better. The podcast will improve. And I look forward to everyone's feedback. You can hear future podcasts or whatever. They'll all be posted on thebithion.blogspot.com. And they will also be on youtube.com/Zytroft. That is my channel. And you can follow me on Twitter at ZytroftEF. And you can also find me on, this podcast will be on SoundCloud as well. And future podcasts will be on SoundCloud along with my other musical compositions. That's Zytroft on SoundCloud. And you can follow me on Instagram to see my artwork that's also posted on the Bithion, but I post some photos and stuff too on Instagram at Zytroft, of course. And thank you all for listening, and have a wonderful time living life between listening to these podcasts. Thank you. Good night.